Hey everyone, it's Melody with Design by Melody. I'm here for the Crafty Channel Surf Facebook group inspiration team, and I have the prompt of something borrowed today. So I'm actually going to be using this in two ways, but the first way is this Pinterest post that I found. It is a layout from Studio Calico, and I'm going to scrap lift this. Now, I had found a sketch first that I had considered using, and then I found this other layout that was already done from Studio Calico. It was I believe somebody on the Studio Calico design team, if I remember that correctly, but I will link it in my blog post as well as the description box below, so you can go check that out if you'd like it. And if I remember, I'll link the other one as well because I actually really like the sketch. So what I was looking for, I have a 5x7 photo and I have a 4x6 photo, both exactly the same, of a trip that my mom took to Alaska last summer. And so I was kind of looking for either a layout or a sketch with the 5x7 in it, or after I started looking at them, I realized that I could just take a layout with two 4x6s or two 3x5s or something like that kind of take up about the same amount of space that a 5x7 would take. So it was actually fairly easy to adapt the sketches and the layouts that I had to kind of fit my needs. Now, the very first thing I'm going to do is pick out my papers, and I'm actually using my kit that I've been working with. This is the one that had the two Gossamer Blue kits and then the Hip Kit Club kit that I kind of made into a large mega kit, and I will link my unboxing video for that down below as well if you'd like to check that out. And it just seemed like these papers were perfect for this photo. So this is the second piece of this something borrowed. Whenever I get my prompt for the month, I start thinking of different ways that I can use it to inspire me to do a layout or do a project or something. And so I kind of come up with a couple different ways that I can approach it. And funny enough, I end up usually using a couple of those methods. So for this one, it's something borrowed, and I'm borrowing the layout design from the Studio Calico design team person. But I'm also kind of borrowing this photo as well. This is not my photo. I did not take it, and I did not go on this trip. So this was a trip that my mom took with a couple of her friends. They actually flew out to Alaska from North Carolina, rented an RV, and drove around Alaska for a couple weeks. 2.5 weeks, 2 weeks. I think it was 2.5 weeks for some reason. And they drove around, and she took some amazing photos, and she sent them to me periodically. She would send them to me and my sisters, and I saved every single one of the photos that she sent me, and this just happens to be one of my favorite ones, and it seems like it's a postcard. Like, it is absolutely beautiful. So I knew I had to scrapbook it. It was not my trip, but it was definitely her trip, and I think it's absolutely wonderful. And she sent a ton of postcards to Kaylin while she was on her trip, so I will be creating like a little pocket at some point to put my album as well, to put all of those postcards in there, and they will be right next to this photo. So the very first thing I'm doing, as I had mentioned, was pulling out the papers. And if you notice in the sketch, the papers are outlined. Now, since I'm using this really dark gray pattern for the little like 1-inch strip on the right side, I just pulled out a white paint pen. This is actually a Sakura Pen Touch 1.0 millimeter white quick dry permanent opaque pen. That is a long name, but that's the pen I used. I actually purchased this on Amazon a couple weeks ago. I want to try my hand at some lettering techniques, and I had saw where someone used this particular pen to write on black. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of get it to work with. And as you can see, it actually works fairly well. It's pretty, it shows up really nicely, and it does not really fade into the background. And so I'm actually very pleased with it. This is the first time I'm officially using it on a project or anything like that. Now, if you look at the Pinterest layout that I'm using as my something borrowed inspiration here, if you look at it, it has a lot of embellishments around the photos, to the left bottom part of the photo and to the right top part of the photo. And they used a lot of different florals that look like they were fussy cut. So what I'm doing is I'm actually going through all of my embellishments that I have in my little kit that I'm working with here, and I'm pulling out anything that I feel could work with my colors. I keep referencing back to the layout, but eventually I'm just going to give up and I'm going to go ahead and start going through all the little pile of embellishments I have and just make a little pile. And I was looking for anything in the gray tones, in the teal or aqua tones. I pulled out a few of the reddish pink tones, like that getaway at the top, because I wasn't exactly sure what my title was going to be. I also pulled out the glassine bag that was in the kit. I pulled out a label and a tag. The layout that I'm scrap lifting has a tag at the top, but I'm going to end up kind of changing that a little bit and just use it, put something else up there at the top, but the placement is still very similar. As you'll be able to see at the end, my layout is very similar to the one that I'm scrap lifting, or that I'm borrowing. This is definitely not my idea, and I will not take credit for that, but it's absolutely an awesome layout design, and I love how this turned out. I did go ahead and use the stamp set in the kit, and I'm using it to stamp a little heart next to this. It's kind of like a journaling spot, but I'm not going to use it as a journaling spot. I'm just using it as a layering element. But it says this was a good idea, and I stamped a heart right next to it. And then I'm also stamping out this label that's on the stamp set as well, and it basically says the details, and it has a place for you to put weather, date, and place. And so I think this is perfect for some journaling, and I will be adding some journaling and adding it to the top. And I'll go ahead and read the journaling. It says the details. This is the most beautiful photo. It's from Grandma's trip to Alaska, and I put the date of June 2006. Place, Alaska, and weather was cloudy, and then I end up adding a little circle icon sticker that's the same color as kind of the dark gray paper, and it's got a snowflake on it, because as you can see in the photo, there is definitely some snow on those mountains as well as on the rocks right there at the coastline. I'm not quite done going through my supplies in my kit. I was kind of slow going at first because I don't typically use sketches or scrap lift. Usually I sit down and I work with whatever inspires me. But I absolutely love the idea of scrap lifting. I just don't do it very often. I think it's because whenever I have a moment to scrapbook, I just go ahead and sit down and scrapbook. I don't go through the process of looking up a layout or anything like that. So I thought that for this week's prompt for me, or this month's prompt for me rather, something borrowed was a great opportunity to really take a moment and find a layout that inspires me from someone else and borrow their idea and create a layout to go in my album. Now, anytime that you're creating a scrap lifted layout or something inspired by a sketch or something like that, there are so many ways you can use it. You can turn the layout to the side. You can kind of create a mirror image instead of the exact image. You could even just take it as a rough idea for the start of your layout and then go with whatever inspires you, and it can turn out completely different and look absolutely nothing like the inspirational piece, the scrap lifted piece, or the sketch. But it's always a really nice kind of jumping off point. And I stuck fairly closely to the scrap lifted layout, like really closely actually. My embellishments were smaller instead of larger like theirs are. Instead of a 6x6 piece of paper behind the photos, I'm using kind of I think it's a 4x6 piece. Oh no, it's probably like... Oh, I think it's actually a 5x7 piece now that I'm looking at it. It was the leftover from another project that I had worked on. Also, instead of using the smaller photos, I'm using the 5x7 photo. And instead of using kind of, I think it's like a smaller title at top, I'm using a little bit more of a stacked title. So mine's fairly close. I mean, if you looked at the two, you can definitely see, especially with the way that the background paper is, it's very, very similar, but it's not exact. And it never can be exact unless you're using the exact same photos, the exact same supplies, with absolutely nothing else added. It would be very difficult to make a layout exactly as your inspirational piece. But that's why we have these inspirational pieces, and that's why this design team was created, so that we have inspiration from a lot of different designers and a lot of different scrapbookers, because you never know what could inspire you, what may speak to you. And these different prompts that we use throughout the month, each person has their own take on those prompts. And I really love the idea that we all use the same prompts each month. It's just rotating between us as designers. And so you can kind of see how we take that and use it to create a page or create a project or create a page in a traveler's notebook or a project life page or cards or whatnot. So anyways, as you can see, I've got my little pile up there to the top left. I've got the grays, the aquas, and kind of the navies. It's more of like a navy gray, and the white pieces as well. And I'm just kind of going through my entire page and just scattering these little bits about. So I end up using some florals, but they are not the big fussy cut ones. But they're little tiny ones that are probably anywhere from 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch. They were just in the little die cut pack that I have in this kit. And one of the kits that I included in this kind of mega kit I created was actually a planer kit. And I found that planer kit had die cuts with it, but interestingly enough, the die cuts are just as packed as a regular scrapbook page kit or a project life kit. They're just on a much smaller scale, so I thought it was really interesting that there's all these little tiny elements, and I have pulled a lot of those out. I have stars, I have little arrows, I have the florals, and I'm just going to kind of use those throughout the page. So instead of having the big embellishment clusters around the photo, I have embellishment clusters, and they've probably got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, probably about 10 little elements in each one, but they're little. So even though they're placed in the exact same space on the layout as the inspiration piece, and even though they are somewhat even mimicking the same types by having these little tiny florals, it's a much different look because these are small and scattered about in those little cluster areas, whereas the inspiration piece had some really large elements that were overlapping. So it is very, very similar, but it also has a very different effect to it. I am going to pull a few of the rubber pieces, as you can see. I've got the dark blue at the bottom as well as that circle aqua one. Now what I did is I went ahead and just didn't make you watch me glue everything down. So I laid everything down and I literally glued everything exactly where I had originally laid it. I was very good about, and this is not always the case, but in this layout I was very good about putting it and being happy with it and not continuously moving things around. I sometimes would check and move a little bit here and there, but once I placed it to where I was happy with, I did not move it again. And so I just took my glue and I ended up using my Tombow Mono multi-glue because a lot of these elements were so tiny. I ended up using that to adhere each of them down, and I didn't even use my glue runner. So I've just added a few more little enamel dots around the page, and that pretty much finishes it. I'm just comparing the inspiration piece to the layout that I've created to see if there's anything that I missed or anything that maybe I would like to add, and then also just to kind of give an overview look. Now, I did notice that in the inspiration piece there were a few staples, so I thought it would be a nice place to also add a few staples onto this layout. I like to actually staple my rubber embellishments down anyways because I feel like they're not always the best about staying stuck down, so I think a staple in those elements is really nice as well. Then there's a few puffy stickers that came in the kit that I'm just kind of looking through to see if anything speaks to me. There was this one with it had like a white and gray wood grain pattern on the back, but had a little aqua heart. And I'm going to go ahead and put that up here by the title. And then there was also kind of a matching star in that same puffy set that's going to go around my title as well. So that is going to finish this layout. I hope you guys have found inspiration with this. Please go to the Something Inspiration team, the Crafty channel star Facebook, and look for all the other Something Inspiration team layouts from the design team. And please let me know if you have any questions. I hope you guys enjoy your day, and I will be back later. All right, guys, bye.